I'll first do a little introduction about myself and the club. And it is an honor today to invite the three guests today to give us a lecture on applications to universities. Okay. I had some I had great interest in math and coding, and I did uh, um, coding contest. I received some really outstanding scores. I received a perfect score on AP Calculus exam in 2019. I received near perfect scores in Euclid contest and received 700 in total. I was invited to Amy 3 years in a row as provincial champion. I was also invited to USAMO this year. And I also got two perfect scores in a row in grade 11's Waterloo contest. I received 400 total, $400 in total from these two contests. Also, I was also the first place in grade 9 of 2020 Canadian Junior Math Olympiad. And I was also invited to CMO this year directly based on scores from COMC. I was in the honor roll of 2020 and 2021 Canadian Computing Contest. I was also accepted by UFS to take universities in class of 2020. I finished two first-year classes, 176 and 177, and I also got invited into the two advanced second-year classes. I also got a perfect score in the 2020 Canadian Senior Math Contest, and I received $500 from it. I also advanced into Gold Division USA Canadian USA Computing Olympiad in 2021. I was also invited to the prestigious Canada USA Math Camp with the full scholarship. And I established Outlook Club 2 years ago, and my goal is to get students who are interested in math and coding to get together and learn from each other. I also invited some famous teacher and really good teachers to tutor and give lectures to students. We also provide contest opportunity. Not only I got outstanding scores in math contests, but also other students got outstanding scores in math contests, such as Rita. And here is her plaque. And over here, this is the certificates and medals received by our students from University of Waterloo. Also, our team from Outlook Club got first place in Canada in Purple Comet Maths contest and seventh place in the world. We also got the first place in Canada for this year's Euclid contest. We also have coding classes. We provide Scratch, Python, Java, C, and C++. Many of our students got into the honor roll in Canadian Computing Contest. And also many students got into Silver Division and Gold Division in the USA Computing Olympiad. I also have my own math league, the Young Math League. It is free. The levels consist of grade 8 or under and high school students. And it happens weekly. It only takes 30 minutes. You can do it at any convenient time on Saturday or Sunday. And in total, there are 6 questions in total. You can submit the answers through Google form. The questions in the YML consist of a full range of school mathematics, including algebra, number theory, combinatorics, and geometry. My goal is to help students become more interested in math by problem solving and assist them in growing conceptually. And you can register by joining our Outlook WeChat group or Facebook. As of now, 46 rounds have already rolled out. I also have my own YouTube channel. This recording will be later posted on the YouTube channel. In this YouTube channel, this YouTube channel includes me talking about contest solutions before their official solution come out. If you're really curious about how to solve a question on contest, make sure you subscribe to my channel. And when there's enough people asking about one question on the YML, I will post a video on how to solve it. Okay, now I'll introduce you to the 3 honored guests that we invited today. So first we have Alex. He is from Colonel Bai High School. He will be going to Toronto, University of Toronto in engineering science. And then we have Neil, who is going to McGill Math and Computer Science double degree. And lastly, you have Danny, who is going to University of Waterloo computer science. And all 3 of them came from Colonel Bai High School IB program. And they're well-rounded, academically competitive, passionate about their chosen area of study, and ready to pursue their passions at university. Now we'll leave the time to them.
All right, thanks. I guess
so you want to share the screen?
Yeah, I'll share my screen. Okay, can you guys see this? You can see this, right?
You might want to. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And also a disclaimer: I'm a bit sick today, so if I sound a bit quiet or something, just let me know so I can talk up louder. All right, so I guess we'll start. Welcome everyone, all 100 of you, to the University Information Seminar, obviously hosted by me, who's Alex Chen, Danny Zhang, and Neil Rahman. So today we're going to be giving a little introduction, and then we'll go over each of our corresponding sections, and then we'll have some time for sent in questions as well as just questions from the audience today, if you have questions today. So yeah, that's our plan for today. Okay, so we're all graduating students at Colonel Bai Secondary School, which is in Ottawa, Ontario. All 3 of us have completed the IB program, and we were all in the Colonel Bai pre-IB program in grades 9 and 10, and we went through the IB program in grades 11, 12. However, we all applied using our Ontario marks. So like Stephen said, we're all going into STEM majors. I'm going into U of T's engineering science. Danny's doing Waterloo's computer science program, and then Neil's doing McGill University's math and computer science double degree. All right, so I guess I'll talk about myself first, and then Danny will talk about himself, and then Neil will talk about himself. So here's my presentation outline. First, I'll be going through my high school experience, and I'll be talking about courses, the IB program or International Baccalaureate program. I'll be talking about clubs and teams, such extracurriculars, and then just school life. So obviously courses are very important for high school, but what courses should one choose? Well, in year 1 and 2, everyone has pretty similar classes. I'll show you guys a graph later, an image later, but the required courses for year 1 and 2 or grade 9 and 10 are pretty strict. So I would say don't worry too much about course selection in grade 9 and 10, because there's not many decisions that are very necessary. The only decisions that are necessary are electives. For example, music, band, drama, art. These are the only ones you can really choose, because obviously as I'll show you later, in grade 9 and 10, you have to take things like English, math, sciences, or science, etc. And yeah, so in year 3 is when there's more specializations and you're free to do more. So my recommendation is to take courses depending on what you want to do in university. So in year 3, I feel like you should be starting to have a sort of idea of what program you want to do. So check requirements for what those programs need in terms of courses, and make sure to take those. For example, if you want to go into health science, for example, at McMaster or Ottawa U, obviously biology and chemistry are pretty important, or actually necessary. And then computer science, you might want to take ICS as an elective, which is Introduction to Computer Science. And then for engineering and IB, I'll talk about that later. Now for year 4, you're actually free to do a lot of stuff because the only required course in year 4 or grade 12 is English, technically. Obviously, you want to take more than just English, but you could technically just take English. But yeah, year 4 is really important for university requirements. So again, for whatever program you want to get into, if there's any grade 12s here or people going into grade 12 here, obviously check the requirements for the programs you want to get into. And obviously build off of your grade 11 courses. For example, if you want to go into, say, um, engineering, I'll just say engineering, and you took chemistry and physics in grade 11, obviously you want to build off of that and then take chemistry and physics in grade 12 as well. Now, again, engineering and IB we'll go over later in more detail. And obviously, just a disclaimer, things we say can change over time. So make sure to be aware of curriculum changes or anything like that. So always stay on top of things.
And yeah, sorry, just to add one thing.
Yeah, sure.
Like Alex said, we're all Ontario students, so like what we say does only apply to Ontario. So if there's anyone like listening from different parts of Canada, obviously like things might be a bit different in your region.
Yeah, so just check your regional requirements, I guess. So yeah, here's a little, here is the course planner for Ontario. Obviously might be different. You can see here, grade 9, for us at least, there's a lot of things that are required. For example, PE is a required course, English, math, science, those are all required courses. Grade 10 also has a lot of required courses, right? So don't worry too much about those. The only things you need to make decisions for are electives, and those don't really impact your university application. Although I would recommend if you do want to go into computer science or anything along those lines, engineering, etc., or you're really interested in coding, I would recommend taking, for example, ICS in grade 10. And if you're interested in like business or things such as that, in grade 10, I would recommend taking the business class elective, or sometimes it's called accounting. I don't know. Depends obviously on your region. And then grade 11 and 12 is obviously when there's a lot more freedom to choose what you want to do, especially in grade 12, as I've said before. Okay, so the International Baccalaureate. So the International Baccalaureate, or IB for short, is an international world-renowned program. It's more challenging and more rigorous than normal school programs, and because students learn at a not much, but faster rate, and there's more course content. And it strives to make students more well-rounded. Now, the diploma program is the one most people are interested in. So I'll talk about how the program actually works. So the program, I guess, for high school spans from grade 9 to 12. And so from grade 9 to 10 is something called pre-IB. So that's what me, Neil, and Danny took. And then from grades 11 to 12 is when the, I guess, actual IB program is put into play. So it's a 4-year program, and you receive your IB diploma when you complete grades 11 and 12. So the actual IB program. So for the application process, this is for Ontario, might be different, for other regions. You take the CAT Engines exam, and then there's essays you have to write. And for Ottawa, there's a teacher recommendation. Obviously, these can change depending on the region, but it should be, similar to this for at least most regions in Canada. So obviously, a big question is, should I actually take IB? There's probably some grade 8s or grade 9s in here, or maybe parents. So what are the pros? Well, it prepares you for university. How does it prepare you for university? Well, as I said, students learn at a faster rate, more course content, right? It's more similar to kind of what a university would be like with the lectures and stuff. There's much more stuff, it's much faster. So it would help you prepare for the university environment. And it also helps develop critical thinking because the content is structured differently. It emphasizes problem solving, critical thinking. For example, in grade 11, there's a required course called TOK, which is called Theory for Knowledge, which is kind of like a philosophy course. So yeah, the IB places a lot of emphasis on critical thinking. And it also digs deeper into each subject. For example, in maths and the sciences, the IB program will have some more complex content or have more content than, for example, a typical, in my case, a typical Ontario course. So it would have more content. And of course, with anything, there are some cons. The IB is a large time investment. There's a lot of study time you have to put in, a lot of work you have to put in, especially for grade 11 and 12. and it can be pretty stressful at times. I know I've felt stressed at many points during IB, and it's not too useful for Canadian university applications specifically if we're talking just like objectively, because yeah, most Canadian universities don't really recognize or take into large account the IB program. It'll international schools like the IB program a bit more. I think Neil will talk about that, but I'll just say that for now. It's not too useful for Canadian universities. So those are the pros and cons of IB. Obviously, the decision comes down to you. So clubs and teams slash extracurriculars, these are very important. It's very important, in my opinion, to be part of a community, right? It's good to help you discover yourself. So I would say find your interests and do something that you are passionate about. Big warning, don't join clubs or teams you don't care about. For example, if I don't really like debate or something like that, but I still join debate, you won't really have a good time in debate. You won't really learn much if you aren't like really passionate about it. So, and you won't really get anything out of it. So my recommendation is don't join clubs or teams you don't care about. Now, I know a lot of you probably know this, but universities place a lot of importance on extracurriculars, especially the harder programs, right? Engineering, business, science, they pretty much require you to participate in extracurriculars. So for this, I say it's important to either do something for a long time, right? Like have a long time commitment to something. For example, if you played hockey all your life, that's really good. Or be really good at something, right? If you're like really good at debate or really good at Model UN, something like that. So I would say it's best to start in something you're interested in as soon as possible so you can get a head start on this. Now, co-op and employment. So the minimum age to work in Ontario at least is 14. Obviously, check with your region. I would say try to get some experience early, for example, in grade 9 and 10, maybe some volunteering experience. And obviously for high school, there is a volunteering requirement. You have to volunteer for, I forget the exact number of hours. Maybe Neil and Danny can tell me. But yeah,
Oh yeah, so sorry to interrupt. Normally it's 40. This year they changed
yeah,
it to
40.
20 because of COVID, but don't count it for your year.
Yeah, so obviously, yeah, 40 hours normally, at least for Ontario. So yeah, volunteering is necessary to pass high school. You need to meet a minimum amount of volunteer hours. So make sure to start volunteering in grade 9 and 10. Now, the co-op course is available in the summer of grade 11, and I would highly recommend doing a co-op over the summer because obviously you're not gonna have much to do in the summer. It's really good to get some experience in the workforce. And it's especially helpful if your co-op applies to the programs you want to go to. For example, actually, I'll talk about it later in the engineering section. But yeah, I would recommend doing a co-op that applies to the program you want to get into during the summer of grade 11. Okay, so school life. Now, a big thing in school life is balance. So no matter what, study and marks are very important, obviously. However, I would say always strive to perform the best you can in school. Obviously, that's a given. So it's very important to study. However, it's also, in my opinion, it's also important to maintain a balance between school and life, right? And this is where time management and responsibility are pretty critical. So make sure to allocate enough time for sports slash self-care slash relaxation, but also allocate enough time for study. So have a balance between them. Obviously, there's some exceptions, like for example, during exam time, you might want to put a bit more time onto studying, instead of sports or whatever, but it applies for the most part. So for school life, I would say make sure to participate in school events slash clubs slash teams. It makes high school a lot more fun and it helps you meet new people, new friends, right? Make new connections. It's also very good for university applications, especially the essays, because it gives you something good to write about. All right, so now I'll talk about applying to university. So I'll talk about how it works, the process, general tips, and also specifically for engineering programs. So how it works, this is pretty specific to Ontario. I'm not too sure about, other regions, but it should be around the same, at least for most Canadian processes. So the applications open around September of grade 12. So Ontario students use OAC, which is a website. I'm not quite familiar with systems outside of Ontario, but it's probably also some sort of website. And obviously, if you're applying to Ontario schools, you also have to use OAC. So applications close early January for most programs. There's some exceptions, such as law or medical school or other things like that. So make sure to check applicable websites when applying. Now the application. So what you want to do when you apply is how it's going to work is you're going to select the programs you wish to apply for on OAC or another applicable website as early as possible, and check how many programs you can apply for each school, right? So if you can only apply for one for each school or multiple for each school, make sure you know that. And if you're applying to prestigious programs, such as like big school engineering programs or like math or health science or something crazy like that, always have backup programs. That's always a good idea, right? Programs you know you can get into. So if you don't get into those big ones, at least you have a backup. So work through the supplementary applications, so the essays, interviews, etc. Not all programs have them. Make sure to know which programs have what supplementary applications. So for example, like Ottawa U's engineering didn't have an application, didn't have supplementary applications. They just looked at marks. But for example, Toronto's engineering program has a bunch of supplementary applications you have to do. And make sure to submit supplementary applications on time. And the supplementary application submission times are usually later than the actual program application time. And again, every program has different submission dates. Obviously, make sure to check them. And always check the program requirements for your specific program. That's a given, right? It's important to know what you have to do. Okay, so my experience. So in high school, in grade 11 and 12, I took physics and chemistry as my sciences, right? My two sciences. And then I took advanced functions and calculus and vectors in grade 11 and 12. This is a IB specific thing because they spread it out over 2 years and it's like one course. For normal schools, advanced functions and calculus and vectors are two separate courses. So keep that in mind. So these were all requirements for engineering programs, which is what I wanted to get into, obviously. So make sure to take them if you wish to study engineering in university. So in terms of extracurriculars, during high school, I was part of a Model United Nations of VEX Robotics and band. VEX Robotics is probably the biggest one in terms of helping me get into engineering, because obviously it's very intertwined with the sort of thing engineers do. I also worked at Spirit of Math and did co-op with Digiterra Interactive, which is a small tech company. So that was during the grade 11 summer. Again, I highly recommend doing co-op. So the programs I applied to, just a little run through. I got accepted. I'm not really going to go through all of them. I don't think it's necessary, but you can kind of see what I was accepted into and what I was rejected from. Now, the big thing to see here is I was rejected from Waterloo. The reason I probably was because I didn't do like the Euclid and stuff, and also I didn't take ICS in grade 12. So I know Danny will talk about the Waterloo application process specifically. So yeah, make sure to listen about that if you want to get into Waterloo, which obviously a lot of people do. Okay, so applying for engineering. So here's some general information. Engineering is a branch of science and technology concerned with the design and building of machines, structures, systems, etc. So it's very important in our modern age, but it's also quite complex. Therefore, engineering programs are usually more difficult to get into and sometimes require a lot of prerequisites. So here are some prerequisites. Obviously, good marks. It varies depending on the program, but about an 80 average is like a bare minimum to get into like the most engineering programs. Many tougher programs require 90 plus averages. Again, it obviously varies between programs, so make sure to check. I know Waterloo, they post up like minimum marks you need to get into for like, for example, computer engineering. So yeah, make sure to check the university websites and such for like mark minimums. And there's also a lot of required courses you need to take. And this is specific to Ontario, but it's probably very similar to for other regions. So obviously you need to take advanced functions and calculus and vectors courses. So these are the math courses. You need to take English, and English is much more important than you might think. I know a lot of people shrug off English. It's very important. I would recommend studying well, doing well in English. Physics and chemistry courses, you gotta take those. And an additional U or M course. So that's like a university, U or M just stands for university preparation course. So like grade 11 and 12 courses. For example, data management or ICS. And I would recommend ICS if you want to go into like, for example, computer engineering. Now, extracurriculars. Some engineering programs don't require any additional supplementary material, such as Ottawa U or Carleton University, and typically only look at marks. So maybe extracurriculars won't apply there. But other engineering programs require supplementary material. And this is where you want to write about the extracurriculars that you've done. So for example, Toronto, Western, Waterloo, I know they all require you to write supplementary stuff. So this is where having extracurriculars is basically necessary to get into those, or if you want a really good chance to get into them. So yeah, that's basically it. I'll hand it over to Danny now.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alex. So yeah, if you want to go to the next slide, I'll just show an outline of my presentation. The same thing. The first part is kind of the same thing that Alex talked about. I'm going to talk a little bit about like my own experience with high school and like how like my own interests and what I've done throughout high school. Make sure to take that into account as I like talk about everything else. And one specific and like a few specific things I want to talk about. First of all, summer school. I did summer school all 3 years that I was like able to in high school. So I understand that like a lot of people like look at like the summer school slot and they don't really know what it entails. It's kind of intimidating, but at the same time, like it's an opportunity to get a credit during the summer. So I'll talk a lot about that and like find out or like try and talk about if it's something that's good or not. And also contests and other extracurriculars. So talk a bit about that. And as Alex mentioned briefly, I'll talk about like university specific like application and preparation. So like what some specific universities, like what they look for in their presentation. So about my own high school experience. So this is just like a preface to what I'm gonna say in the future. So like I'm definitely gonna do my best to be objective, but like make sure to keep like what I've done in mind. Because these are because like obviously there's an element of opinion in everything I say, and yeah, I'm going to be talking about my own choices. So as I mentioned, I did take summer school like all 3 years during high school. So between grades 9 and 10, I took civics and careers. Between grades 10 and 11, I took 3U biology, and between grades 11 and 12, I took 4U biology. And so I would describe myself as someone who is like STEM oriented throughout high school. If you're like if you're here at this Zoom meeting and that's something you want to get into, that's good news for you. So math and physics were generally like among, if not just my favorite subjects. And I also wrote a lot of math and computing contests, and that's something I'm going to be talking about in a bit as well. And specifically about university, I was also like really unsure about which program to go into, even though like I was accepted like relatively early into most of them. So like December and February and April, these are like all pretty early for the university, but I did leave my decision until last few days at the end of May. And yeah, as previously mentioned, I'll be going into a Waterloo CS college next year. So just jumping into summer school now. I guess so. First of all, just like an introduction to summer school, I'll talk a bit about like like why you should be interested in summer school. Just in case there's people who like aren't very familiar with it. So first of all, why would you consider summer school, right? So it lets you like free up a course slot in a year. It lets you focus on one course during the summer, and you can focus on that for like a month instead of having 4 or 8 other courses to juggle. And it also lets you have one less course in the school year and lets you like get a course out of the way. So essentially you can take one course and like kind of put it under a microscope. So it's not as simple as that. There are also drawbacks, as I'm gonna say right here. Like, so about summer school, your understanding of the subject in summer school will almost certainly be poorer than if you had taken it during regular school. Now, I'm saying almost certainly because obviously different people learn in different ways, and there are definitely gonna be people who like learn better in summer school, right? So the reasons for this are like, so first, there's no time to let things sink in. So in summer school, you spend 4 weeks, 6 hours every weekday doing one subject. So there's never any like compare this to regular school, right? Where maybe like for a few months every day you do like maybe 1 hour or 2 hours of a subject, and so there's no time like at night to let things sink in because you've like learned so much during the day. And frequently, as was the case for me, I believe all 3 years, or at least for the first 2 years. The third year, my third year was online, so it's kind of weird. But yeah, there's frequently tests every day, So that's definitely something that's going to put a lot of stress on you during the summer, because every night you're studying for a test the next day. And you also have nearly no time for assignments because everything's so compressed. Yeah, so like as I've written here, like if you normally like maybe you would normally have a month to write that essay, but now it's due in 2 days, or like it's due at the end of the week, and you're just gonna have to pack that in among like everything else you have to do. But on the plus side, it's definitely possible to be easier to get high grades in the summer because you can just focus on that one subject, like as opposed to like being distracted with all your other subjects and tests. You do only have that one subject. And finally, you should realize this is a considerable time investment. It is probably a bad idea to try and do something else along with summer school in the summer, or at least in July, because summer school ends at the end of July. But yeah, it's 5 or 6 hours a day, and then homework time, and then not to mention like all your assignments, and also like all of your test preparation, because there's again, like I mentioned, there's very frequently tests. So like knowing all this information, like it's pretty intuitive to like now ask yourself the question, like, should I take summer school or should I do something else? And the answer is, as you will probably frequently hear, it depends. So it depends on like what you think you can get out of summer school. It depends on your learning style. It depends on what you would be doing in the summer if you weren't taking summer school. So I'm gonna touch on this a bit more next slide actually. But first I'm gonna say like, so we can so like I kind of consider like summer school to be divided into like 2 categories kind of. So first, we can talk about the summer right after grade 9. So like between grade 9 and 10. This is the first summer after you get into high school. And since you're like a freshman in high school, you just got in, you don't you'll generally have like fewer extracurricular opportunities, or like the opportunities that you do have, you might be competing against someone like in grade 10, for example. So it might be less likely for you to get an extracurricular opportunity. It might be less likely for you to get a good one. So, and also this coincides with like a really good thing to take in summer school. This is just for Ontario though. So civics and careers. So this is a course that's widely described as boring and not very useful. So I'm not going to comment on like I'm not going to comment on the actual like delivery of the course, but I am going to say this is the definitely certainly by far the most popular summer school course. And it was taken by like pretty much everyone I know in the summer after grade 9. So yeah, it's not a great use of time during the next school year, and it frees up a course slot for you to be able to do something else in grade 10. And then the other category of summers is the summers after grade 10 and grade 11. And these are a little bit different from the previous one because there's more extracurricular opportunities as you get older, and it's also more important that you have an extracurricular opportunity because you're about to like apply to university, right? It's getting closer and closer. And furthermore, there's less of a clear choice of what courses to take, and I'll talk about this next slide as well. But essentially, in grade 9, civics and careers is your like number one. It's a really clear choice, and especially yeah. So in grade 9, like civics and careers should definitely be your number one choice for a course to take. But in grade 10 and 11, there's not really as clear of a choice. There's not really like that mandatory course that you don't want to take in the school year, so you take it in the summer. Like that hypothetical course doesn't exist. And so yeah, it's like in these summers, it's more debatable if summer school is a good course or a good idea, sorry, for the average students. Yeah. So now finally, if you do decide to take summer school, which courses should you take, right? So the summer after grade 9, as I mentioned, civics and careers should definitely be your number one choice. There's not really a like at least in again when I talk about courses, this is all in Ontario. I'm not familiar with the curriculums of other provinces or other countries. So yeah, civics and careers is definitely your best choice because it lets you get it out of the way in summer. It's also pretty well suited for the summer, as you'll see in the courses not to take section. So for the summers after grade 10 and 11, so the course that you should take, in my opinion, it's a course in which you have interest, but where you don't have to fully understand it. So it's something that like you think that, oh, like it's nice to learn more about it, but nothing hinges on you understanding it completely. So like, for example, for me, this was biology because I was interested in computer science and engineering mostly, and not so much like medical science. And so if I don't really understand how like photosynthesis works, that's not gonna kill me in the future years. And so like, for example, I would never consider taking physics in summer because that's something I like certainly need to understand for engineering. Otherwise, yeah, that's just gonna screw me up for the future years. And about that, we're gonna go to like courses not to take. So first, important courses where you need to fully understand. So something like English or math, you should almost never take these courses in the summer. And especially English, it's in all three of these reasons. So I'll come back to that. But yeah, also like anything relating to anything like you plan to major in. So like if you are planning to do biomed, you don't want to take biology in summer school because it's going to be a really rush learning approach. It's not going to be a very deep like learning system, and it's just like generally going to be bad. And another example of courses not to take is courses that aren't suitable to be like crammed in a month, or where you don't want to do the same thing for 6 hours a day. So this is something like phys ed, where you probably don't want to like be running around outside for 6 hours a day. It's better to do it like an hour a day over like a long time. Or music, where it's like playing your instrument 6 hours, like playing your instrument 6 hours a day like isn't particularly useful. It's better to practice over like long time spans, and that's more adapted for like the regular school year. And also English. Again, as I said, you're going to see English again, and also in the next point, because English is something where like time really helps, and especially things like essays, where it's useful to have a long deadline, but you'll definitely not be having that during the summer. So yeah. And finally, another category is courses where universities might not trust your summer school marks. Now, this is very specific to U Waterloo, though it sometimes applies to other universities as well. Basically, U Waterloo has this policy where if you take a course and it's not at your regular day school, they might they're not going to be very happy with you, because essentially like they think like there's a possibility that you took this course at this other school to get a higher mark. And so this is something where this is something where you might want to avoid taking anything outside of regular school for your top 6 courses. So like English, math, sciences. But again, this is specific to Waterloo, and it may be specific to engineering as well. So yeah. Again, like so for me, this is another reason why I would never, like, for example, take physics in the summer, because if I apply to engineering and physics is something that's required, and then they say, well, we don't trust your physics mark, then that's a disaster, obviously. So yeah, now I'm gonna move on to contests. So yeah, about contests and extracurriculars. Alex talked a bit about extracurriculars as well, but I'm just gonna say briefly about contests. So if you're applying for a program in exactly the Waterloo University math department, so math department includes pure math, and it includes CS. And it also includes the CS BBA, for those of you who know what that is. If you don't know, that's not that important. You'll find out in grade 12. So math and computer science, essentially. And if you're applying for those programs, CMC contests are like really important, because those are that's one of the biggest things they look at. But apart from that, the contests are pretty much just something to be like done for fun or to improve your skills. And yes, they will still help you in applications, and they could help you for scholarships as well, but they won't be like nearly as important at any university, or even like any other program at Waterloo, like even though Waterloo math puts so much of an emphasis on it. But for other extracurriculars, I would say if you've read the line, it's really similar to what Alex said. So pick extracurriculars early, and pick what you like, and pick what you want to major in. So I think early is really important. That's something that like I myself neglected to, and I really regret. So like if you start like looking for opportunities really early, it'll help you gather experience. It'll help you like make your applications to your other jobs or your other extracurriculars better, and it'll make it easier. So it also gives you something productive to do in the summer in case you decide not to take summer school, or even if you do decide to take summer school, because summer school only lasts a month, not both months of the summer. And if you pick an extracurricular that you like or that's in your major, So like relevant extracurriculars are definitely going to be a really big asset in university applications. And it also gives you something to write about in your essay questions. And yeah, so like essay questions frequently just ask like, oh, like describe an opportunity, like describe a time you took leadership or something like that, right? And you definitely need to have extracurriculars to be able to talk about a time where you like took leadership or anything along those lines. But yeah, to find your extracurriculars, like ask your friends, use Google, like do anything. And yeah, so for this summer, it is a little bit late if you're looking for extracurriculars in July. At the same time, though, there's definitely like volunteering opportunities where it's like you can just go. So yeah, like do your best to find out about them, and it's definitely a good idea to be involved in them. And yeah, so this is the last thing I'm going to talk about. Also, like applying to specific universities. So I'm just going to say a few things about like each of these like kind of 4 categories. And obviously, like not all universities fall into these. These are just the ones I'm familiar with. So for most universities, like for example, University of Ottawa or Carleton University, and like even most programs at like U of T and Waterloo, which are generally considered like the good, like the or not good, but like the best universities in Ontario. So like at these programs, they'll admit you as long as your average is high enough. And for these programs, you'll find on their websites they say cutoff. They say like admission just by cutoff. And the cutoff will be like a number, like 87 or like 90 or like mid 90s or whatever. So these they usually give you really quick admittances because they just look at your mark and they go, oh, it's bigger than that number, so they admit you. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And they don't take time to read essays, so they don't ask for essays. So you just need to apply. Typically, the application is just fill in your information, and there's never any questions like, oh, like tell me about your leadership or anything like that. Yeah, it's just apply. But for U of T, for CS and engineering department, I want to put an emphasis on this. So your English mark is disproportionately important. So kind of like Alex said, but like even more so if you apply to U of T. So they look at English as a very, very important mark in any program, including programs where you don't use or like you barely use English. So like computer science, engineering science, or anything. Like English is like pretty much like you have to do well in English, and then they'll like be like, oh, how did you do in math for your math program? For Waterloo math and engineering, so like this gets into like where all marks are important. Well, obviously, I guess for everything, all marks are important, but for Waterloo, like maybe even more so. But one thing I do want to point out about them is like beware of out of school marks. So like it's what I mentioned a while ago. So basically, if you took a course outside of your regular day school and you want to use it in your average, they will ask you for a reason why you took it out of school. And if you can't give a satisfactory reason, they will adjust your mark to exactly 70% or lower. So like if you have a 95 and you want to use it in your average, then they bring it down to a 70. And like, and I believe 70% is the max. So if you have like a 68, I'm not sure why you would use it in your average, but let's say you want to use a 68 in your average, you would go further down. You wouldn't go up to 70. So yeah, that's why I've written here, like you can lose up to 30% off your grade. So just be careful because you definitely need to have that like a satisfactory reason for that. And also, yeah, so Euclid is disproportionately important in math degrees, including CS. Oh, again, I talked about this a while ago, but yeah. So at least like based on what I know about how the application process goes, if you're anywhere close to the cutoff and you have a good Euclid score, then you get accepted. So the way they say this is individual selection from a certain range of marks. So individual selection means like they go through each person's application and they like pick them out, like, oh, I want you. No, I don't want you, even though your average is like the same, right? So yeah, if you're close to the cutoff, but you have a high Euclid mark, then they will take you. And that's why Euclid is really, really important. And finally, for Ivy League US schools. So I understand that like for a lot of students and parents, this is definitely something that they want to look into because these schools are among the best in the world. So definitely everything is important, but I want to emphasize that you definitely need well-known accomplishments and international accomplishments. So like I've listed here like IMO and IOI. So those for those of you unfamiliar, that's the International Math Olympiad and the International Olympiad in Informatics, which is programming pretty much. And yeah, so those are things where like if you live in Canada, like they send 3 kids out of all of Canada to the IMO, or like 4 kids, or it's a single digit number of kids. So yeah, so like if you want to apply to an Ivy League school, you have to be the best of the best, pretty much. And also US awards, because they're US schools, so they care about US awards. Yeah. And one last thing is, it's really difficult for international students to get in, and especially if you're applying to STEM. And obviously it's not unheard of, but like just to give you that warning, if that is something you're considering. Yeah. And that's it for me. And I will pass this time on to Neil, who I believe will be talking about some other things.
Yeah, so I'll basically just talk about what I wanted, what I did in high school to try to reach those goals, and how that advice could affect you or your child. So first of all, my priorities were a bit different from Danny's and Alex's, right? So Alex was going into engineering. I wanted to go into data science. So what I needed here was a degree with both math and computer science, or there are some programs that are specialized entirely on data science. So for me, because I want to do data science, I would also like a grad degree in the future, which means that I don't really need co-op as much. I know Alex was talking about that, and that can be really important to a lot of people here, but it wasn't to me, so I didn't put as much emphasis on that. But I did want to go to a university where there's a good route into grad school, which is why I put McGill as my first choice. So yeah, in Canada, it's one of the better options for trying to get into grad school. So I'll tell you more about where I was accepted, where I was rejected, and the reasons for that based on my grades and extracurriculars. Yeah, so as Alex and Danny mentioned, I was accepted early in December for U Ottawa and Carleton. This was based on my grade 11 marks, which were in the mid 90s or something. Basically, they deemed that these grade 11 marks were good enough to accept me early. Most major universities won't do that. There are some systems in America where they might do that. It's not very common. In Canada, the really top universities like U of T kind of universities will not do that, but they did accept me in February for their first round. So U of T computer science, there's an option later on to do a double degree in math and computer science. Waterloo math, I was hoping to go into data science. So there's an option for that in both Waterloo math and Waterloo computer science. Then I got into McGill math and computer science. But notably, I was not accepted into Waterloo computer science, and I will explain why it is mostly to do with extracurriculars. So I'll just talk a bit about my background, and that might help contextualize these things. So I have the standard Ontario degree and also the IB degree, just like Alex and Danny. But the really important thing here is I know there have been a lot of questions sent in about IB and how that can affect your chances. To put it briefly now, because I was applying to only Canadian universities, that's where I wanted to be, my IB performance did not affect my admissions at all. They were looking at my Ontario marks, and those Ontario marks were solid. So my top 6 average, which is what they look at, were 98.2 for the round when I was admitted. Waterloo computer science decided to wait. My grades dropped a little, but it was still an average that was competitive, right? And then really depending on the program, it depended more on the extracurriculars. So the main thing I had for extracurriculars is I had some decent leadership experiences. So I was the co-president of my school. I had a lot to write for that because I would plan a lot of activities, things like that. And it also sounds good to just be president of the school, I guess, just from a university perspective. Then I was exec for a few clubs like DECA, some business club. But you'll notice that I don't actually have significant computer science experience. So you might be wondering how I got into comp sci programs. And that's what I'll talk about now. So McGill, the university I really wanted, I knew I wanted that since about grade 11. They only look at marks, actually. So if any of you are considering that school, there are definitely some universities that exclusively look at marks, but this is not very common. My grades were good enough for McGill. Then U of T takes a more balanced approach. They're looking at grades and also leadership experiences in their extracurriculars. So for their supplementary application for their program called computer science, there were actually no questions for just computer science. And there will definitely be some programs like this. I think it's very similar in the US, for example. I just had to talk about my leadership experiences. There was even one question out of the 4 on their supplementary application was about telling them about and experience with discrimination. This is the kind of things they look for, experiences and leadership and things like that. So that's what U of T, for example, prioritizes. You can always find this information by doing your research based on the program you really want. But then Waterloo, you might have heard of the AIF, Admission Information Form. They really place emphasis on coding experience for their computer science, software engineering, etc. programs. I didn't really have that. I didn't even take the computer science course at school. I'll talk a bit more about that later. So that's pretty much why I wasn't accepted into Waterloo rather than, but I was for McGill and U of T. Just the way that I planned my high school experience, it was more suited to those programs. And that worked out for me. But if you want a program like Waterloo, then yeah, you really need to look for experience in that regard, employment or project or something like that. Just some other examples. I didn't apply there myself, but I have some friends that did. McMaster Health Science, one of the very popular med programs, basically, or I guess bio programs, they place a lot more emphasis on like critical thinking. They have these essays you need to write for the application that count for half or more of the weight. And it's really about like critical thinking, philosophy even. So you might want to work on your writing skills if you want a program like that. You really just need to look for what the program you wants from you, right? Like it really varies a lot. And that's something that's really important in this application process and to plan your whole high school experience. So just research really what your university wants. And then just some brief notes on like grades and courses and things like that. So yeah, I did the IB program, which meant that I didn't really actually have as much time for extracurriculars. I spent so much time studying for IB just to get the grades I wanted, because I knew by grade 11, like, yeah, I want McGill and they want high grades. They don't actually have any section for extracurriculars. That's where I put my priorities. But if you don't want to do that, then, you know, IB might not be for you if that's what you're considering. A brief note on the ICS course, and this applies to a lot of programs, not just like computer science. There are sometimes courses that can be very helpful, like computer science for computer science or a business course for business. You need to really research your program requirements for prerequisites, because this is not a prerequisite for computer science programs. In fact, I don't remember the exact rule, but basically because not all schools at this time are offering this course, they cannot consider it a prerequisite. It's considered discrimination. They actually cannot consider it even for priority. Like if two students have the same averages, but one has ICS, neither one will get priority. Just look at the prerequisite courses. That's where they can distinguish. They can decide this mark is more important. Do you need this mark? Things like that. So just really research. I also took like physics and chemistry. Those are very common prerequisites in science. I did not take biology because I ruled out any pathway like med early on. If you know you're not going to do some pathway, there's not really a point in taking those courses that might be prereqs. But if you're not sure, then just like, yeah, just take those, take what could be a prereq for a program you may be considering. Just, yeah, research is really the big thing. One thing I'll mention just as advice, I guess, is that a lot of like unconventional electives are good options to boost your average and might be more strategic than taking something that's closer to the program. Like for CS programs, a lot of people that took computer science as a course, they might have actually had a disadvantage because the marks are not as easy. I took band and got a 99 in that. Like, so you can tell from your school sometimes that some teachers are easier, they'll be more generous, especially with programs that, with courses that are a little lighter. So you might want to check that out. You don't actually get an advantage from courses that look closer to your program if they're not prerequisites. All right, and then extracurriculars, this is a big one. So the main advice I would have, and it's a bit subjective, but this is what I feel, it's very difficult to succeed in extracurricular activities that you do not enjoy. So I mentioned like for programs like Waterloo, they really want experience in computer science, right? If you don't really enjoy computer science, you're probably not going to do very well in an extracurricular like that. And then you can decide for yourself, like if that program is really for you. But that's the very rare case where if you're sure you want that program, but you still don't enjoy the activity, yeah, you should persist. Other than that, you're going to have a lot more to write for supplementary applications and stuff if you actually enjoy the activity, because the experience will be more meaningful, the writing will come more naturally, and it'll just be stronger, really. And then it'll be more convincing to whoever's reading it, and then you have a better chance. So yeah, my personal advice is also to try a lot of extracurricular activities, especially like if you're in grade 9 or something. You really want to just try a bunch, and you can easily quit. That's a very big thing. Like if you try a bunch, you know you're not going to like this and it's not being very useful, you can quit very quickly. And as long as you have something that's productive, you'll be fine. Like I tried plenty of clubs that I quit very quickly. Debate club, key club, jazz band. I tried all these things, and I quit. I didn't need them for my university applications, and I committed really hard to the ones I enjoyed. So that would be stuff like student council, DECA, this business club. Like uh, I also played a lot in my school orchestra, and then became a section leader for that. And then I had meaningful experiences there. And it's just it's really important to like, you have to actually believe in this experience, right? I know a lot of people, they're thinking about university so much that they try like all these activities, or they try to commit to activities that they think will be important for their programs. But if you're just doing it for university, like that's your mindset, you're just not going to get much out of it. You're not going to write something very powerful, most likely, unless you're a great writer. So that's why you really want to do things you enjoy, and then just commit very hard to them. And the last thing about that, I would say, is it's like, it's never too late for something. Like uh, but if you're really trying for like a dream route, like you're trying to get into top American universities, Harvard or something, or you're trying to get into Waterloo here in Canada, and then let's say for Waterloo you just don't have that coding experience, and now you're in like November of grade 12, you might have a harder time. But a lot of people think like you need to start preparing in grade 9. If you miss that opportunity, it's okay. It's not ideal. Even in grade 11, if you really try hard to like network and things, to try and get a job, get a LinkedIn or something, and just reach out a lot and really work on whatever you're trying to do, and just if you learn it on your own or something, you can definitely get opportunities very late into high school, which you can get in time for university. The less time you have, the harder it is, but it's never quite impossible. So yeah, try to be flexible. And then just I think this is my last slide. uh, which universities look for what? I talked a bit about Canadian universities in particular, but I'll talk more about the world. Yeah, and Danny mentioned some of this, but here's some more notes. So yeah, Canadian universities place a lot of emphasis on grades. So it's not going to be all of it and most of them. McGill is really an exception, but you do really want strong grades for a good chance. Like a lot of programs, even the competitive programs, you get a certain like grade average and you're in, right? And then if you're slightly below that, extracurriculars can help you up basically. Only the really top programs like McMaster Health Sci or Waterloo Software Engineering, things like that, that's where you need strong extracurriculars as well, regardless of your grades. Other than that, like grades can really help a lot, but they're not everything. It's best to just look for a balance. Things like IB, standardized tests, those will not help in Canada, like pretty much at all. American universities, they look at grades, but place a lot more emphasis on these supplemental applications, leadership experiences, things like that, and international achievements, like Danny mentioned. Those can really help a lot. A lot of the essays I've seen, the applications are also very abstract. You need to be a good critical thinker and just give them something interesting, you know? So yeah, writing ability can really affect these applications. Standardized tests like the SAT um, will also improve your chances a lot. We and then we did not apply to European universities, none of Alex, Danny, and I. The most we know is that this is the only case where IB might actually help your case. A certain IB score can guarantee you into some European universities. Yeah, so we'll just look at some questions you already sent in and take them on. Uh, yeah, some of them will give advice from all of us. Some of them are a more direct answer. So the first one is about IB. Is it necessary to attend full IB? What are the benefits of this program? What is the biggest challenge? Is it worth it, basically? Uh, so the first thing I'll mention is this full IB thing. If you're wondering about taking like just a few IB courses, it is possible in some areas. It is not possible everywhere. That is something important that I wanted to mention. There's the IB diploma program. So that's where you do all the requirements, CAS, 6 IB courses, etc. And there's also the IB certificate program where you only take a few IB courses. That's what some of you might be considering, like, oh, I just want to take IB math or something like that. That doesn't work everywhere. I know in Ottawa, until very recently, they did not really allow the IB certificate program except in extreme circumstances. They have now opened that up to, I think, 60 spots a year or something across all of Ottawa, so both Merivale and Crone-By. So that's still limited space. I would not count on getting the certificate program. Just around the world, they tend to restrict access to that. So keep that in mind if you're considering that. Just look into what's available to you. As for is it worth it? We'll all take a crack at this. I would say that IB absolutely can be worth it for some people, but for more than half of students, it is actually not. That is what I've observed in my experience with IB at one of the top IB schools in the world, Crone-By. We have pretty successful IB performances, and yet a lot of people kind of missed out by taking IB because they didn't get as much time for extracurriculars, and the programs they wanted really put emphasis on the extracurriculars or something like that. And then you just don't get a competitive advantage for university for IB unless you want to apply to Europe. Yeah, like those are the cons. The good part of it is, one thing is you can get transfer credits at select universities. For example, at McGill, I will get transfer credits. I don't need to take physics anymore. That helped me. And another big thing about IB is it will not directly improve your grades, but you're around a lot more competitive students. You tend to get better teachers. The content is a lot more difficult, so you certainly run the risk of getting lower marks because you can't keep up. Like a lot of people do have that struggle, and that's why it's not worth it for a lot of people. But on the other hand, if you're already doing really well and you're keeping pace with the IB requirements, like it's usually, the courses are usually about a year ahead, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. If you can keep pace with that, because of the grading system and because of the students around you just kind of giving you some drive, it can be better for you, but it can also be really stressful. You should put some serious consideration before choosing the IB program, because although it can help you, I would say it does not help most people.
I mean, yeah, I think there's nothing really more to add to that. So I guess I'll do this question. So how should I plan for 11th and 12th grade more effectively? So I would say, first of all, I know we've mentioned it a lot, but make sure to do your research. Like, make sure to know which courses you want to take for what programs, and other things such as that. Make sure to know what your school offers, etc. And a really good resource for this is your guidance counselor. For anyone who isn't in high school yet, or for any parents who don't know, guidance counselors basically are, it's in the name. They help guide you through the high school experience. You can book appointments with them or just pop in once COVID ends and talk to them. They are very useful. They help me a lot, and basically they know everything. They know everything about course requirements. They know everything about what courses you need to take. They know everything about IB programs, AP programs. They know everything about applying to university. So I would recommend talking to them. So basically my big two tips are to plan 11th and 12th grade more effectively is obviously do research and keep in touch with your guidance counselor. So any suggestions? The second part of this question is any suggestions and experience for, so basically AP. So, I'm not gonna lie, I don't really know too much about the AP program. Maybe Danny or Neil can, jump in for this one, but I'm assuming, yeah, sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, you can go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So about AP, from what I understand, essentially, so like for those of us who are unfamiliar, AP is just essentially something where it's similar, where it's kind of similar to IB, but I believe that it's a bit more independent between different courses, and you can take, like, for example, like as Neil like just talked about with the previous question, at Crone-By, I believe it's not possible to take part IB, but in AP that's definitely something you're allowed to do. So like you can do like one AP course, for example. And also from what I understand in general, AP and IB are like kind of like neck and neck, like IB students like to say that like they have a harder time, and AP students like to say they have a harder time. And so like as an IB student myself, like I might be biased, right? But from my understanding, they are about similar difficulty. And obviously like I'm not involved in the AP program, so I can't like say things with 100% certainty. But I would say like if you're at a school that does offer the AP program and you think that like you are able to keep up with the increased amount of work and perhaps like a faster pace of work, taking an AP course in like some credits will definitely be an advantage. because it'll help you motivate. It'll help you like motivate yourself to do things. It'll help you to learn more about a subject. You'll frequently have better teachers. Sometimes you'll get university transfer credits. So obviously there's lots of advantages, but at the same time, you know, there is more work. It is more difficult. So yeah. Again, yeah. Like at the end of the day, it's hard for me to give like an objective verdict because I'm not involved in the AP program. So just keep those things in mind.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. So this question is about, do I need to convert from 7-point system to percent system? If you don't know, the IB marks on a 1 to 7 scale. So it's pretty similar to just the normal like percentage scale. It's just the numbers are, instead of 1 to 4 is 1 to 7. So for example, 7 is 97 to 100, such as an example. No, short answer is no. Obviously verify with your curriculum and the university you're applying to. So for Ontario, or for at least for the Ontario IB program, there's basically 2 marks. There's the OSSD, so the normal Ontario mark. That's just the percentage. And then there's the IB mark, so like from 1 to 7. And typically priority is given to the Ontario mark, but obviously check with the university to make sure this is true. And you don't have to convert yourself. Basically, yeah, they send both, I believe, but universities normally place more emphasis on just the normal Ontario mark. Yeah. I believe Neil can answer the next one.
Yeah, so if you can get a 7 in IB physics, how much of the usual score, essay, and unified test in May? So from my interpretation of, we'll try to go with my interpretation of this. Basically, the marking system in any IB course will be like, there's an internal assessment and there is a final exam. So the internal assessment for physics is, it's a kind of like independent lab report. So that'll be worth 20% of your grade, and that exam will be worth 80% of your grade. If you're wondering like how that grade is determined, each one is assigned a mark, and then they just take the cumulative of that, and then they get a certain percentage, and then they will convert that certain percentage back to a grade boundary. If you're wondering what you need to get a 7, it will typically be around 80%, just like in terms of percent, because the content is quite difficult. And it depends on the year. It depends on how many people are getting certain percentages. It can drop as low as like 65. It's usually closer to 80. It could go higher than that. You probably just want to try your best instead of guessing what will be good enough. And your teacher will probably be a pretty good guide for what will be good enough if you're taking an IB course at the time.
Yeah, and this is what people talk about when they say like the IB boost, for example. It's not really a boost, it's more of a conversion rate. So in the actual IB program for grade 11 and 12, there's a conversion rate for all the IB courses. So for example, this might not be true, but for example, let's say you're taking chemistry and you get an 87 on a test, it'll be converted to like a 95 because the content is much more difficult than normal Ontario. So that's what Neil's talking about. Okay, so when a full IB student applies for university, do the full IB, if applying for engineering major, have 6 major results in English, math, I'm guessing this is a mistranslation, so physics and chemistry count as each one. So it's important to verify if you are also receiving a diploma for your local curriculum. So when possible, the universities will prioritize the provincial level grades. So that's the Ontario level grades. If the question is referring to the top 6 average concept, that is mainly a concept on the Ontario level, as well as some other provinces. So in this case, your IB marks are not a factor, even if you are taking IB courses. So in this case, math would count for 2 because you're taking 2 courses, right? The calculus and vectors and advanced functions. If you're only receiving the IB diploma, the concept of 6 major results does not apply, but you are correct that English, math, physics, and chemistry will be prerequisite courses for engineering. So yeah, those are the prerequisites for engineering. obviously check the websites of the universities you're applying to. For example, higher level math may be required if you're only receiving the IB diploma. And yeah, to add on to that, if anyone doesn't know what like higher level, standard level is, basically in IB for grade 11 and 12, there's standard level courses, so SL, and then higher level courses, so HL. And I believe you have to take 3 HL courses in grade 12. And basically the higher level courses just go over some more stuff.
So moving on from that, so when a full IB student applies for a university, oh, never mind, that is the wrong question. That is the one Alex just answered. So are IB scores the same across the country when applying to colleges or universities? Is it the same as for non-IB students, and is there an advantage? So just for like a brief answer, so for the first part of the question, yes, full IB scores are the same across the country and across the entire world. That's the point of IB. And it's called the International Baccalaureate. And so, well, I guess like one of the points of IB is the idea where that like the curriculum is consistent and marks are consistent across the entire world. And so like it's kind of like a source that can be trusted. And so especially in Europe, I believe that's something that they do put an emphasis on. Is it the same as for non-IB students? No, it is not. So non-IB students don't have an IB grade, obviously. So yeah, and obviously, like if you're a non-IB student, there's no such like kind of like standardization. Whereas for IB students, like everyone takes the same exam, for example, and your internal assessments, IAs, which are just an assignment that you have to complete in the second year of any IB program you do. Those can be marked internationally by an examiner that's like halfway around the world, and your exams are marked internationally by like any examiner around the world. But yeah, so essentially, yes, no, it is not the same as for non-IB students, because non-IB students do not receive an IB mark. And finally, is there an advantage? Again, that's a pretty complicated question to answer. So like obviously on the one hand, you could say that you have an advantage of being an IB. Okay. Okay. So so obviously like you can't directly compare IB students to non-IB students in terms of scores. Like from the perspective of a university, right? If an IB student has a 5 and a non-IB student has like an 85%, it's pretty difficult to compare the two. And so that's why we have like the IB conversions. And so like if we consider like a full IB student and a non-IB student, the only way to compare the two is by converting the IB grade to a non-IB grade, or vice versa. And so the question of like whether or not there is an advantage, it's like yeah, I guess especially if you're applying to like a local university, there's not really either an advantage or a disadvantage, because your IB mark like will come back to your own mark at the end of the day. And also one thing that we wanted to mention is like as a general trend, but definitely not like a 100% trend. So Canadian and American universities usually favor like your local grading scale. So for example, if I have a 6 and that converts to a 96%, then Canadian American universities will probably look at the 96%. And European universities usually like the IB grading scale more. So they will look at your 6 and they'll say, okay, this is a 6. Yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. So if you're applying for CS or CE or any program like that, what's the minimum number of IB points to have any hope to get in? Well, we don't really have an exact answer for this, because obviously the standard, like the minimum mark, varies a lot between universities, as we've previously discussed. And also you can easily be accepted in with a slightly lower mark if you do a lot of extracurriculars or are really involved in the community or anything like that. But if we're talking on like from purely like marks point of view, the IB points, like Danny said, at least for Canada and the US, are normally just converted into Ontario marks. So for example, if you have a 6+, it'll be converted into 96, and that's the mark the universities will look at. So in terms of what the minimum number of IB points you need to have to like get into the programs, obviously check what the requirements for the programs are. For example, Waterloo CE, they want, I forget the exact one, but it might be around like 90, 94, 95 to like have a good chance, a good competitive chance. So that would be about like an IB 6. So yeah. I guess next question.
Wait, I'm just going to clarify one important part. We talk about this conversion. Your school should do that locally, by the way. Like your school, like if you're doing both Ontario and IB, you'll be taking IB courses. They will also give you an Ontario mark, and you can submit both, but the universities will look at the Ontario mark or something if you're applying in Canada. It's not like if you submit only IB marks to the universities, they'll convert it themselves. That's not the case. If you're only submitting IB marks, they will only look on the IB mark scale. But there is a conversion that your local school will most likely do, unless you're not also doing your local curriculum. But on to the next question. So we have a kid who is good at math, advanced to the invitational tournament at the COMC, finished 12th grade math in 9th grade, went on to an IB high school. But because of that, he skipped IB math. So yeah, so your high school graduation transcripts, you have a better score in math with the regular score, but the IB subjects are weaker. I can't speak to your exact case too much. Like I'm not, like I don't know exactly what's going on, and it depends a lot on the university, especially like where you're applying. And then these extracurriculars, like Waterloo would probably be pretty impressed by that. Maybe some other schools, not so much. It's hard to tell. But the big thing I want to address is that if you're also getting a regular score for math, like an Ontario score or some other kind of local score, it is very likely that universities will prioritize that. And if you have weak IB marks, as long as it's not spilling over into like weak local marks, you'll be perfectly eligible for any kind of like math or CS or engineering programs. And you should still be competitive as long as the local marks are good.
Okay, so moving on. So what advantages or sorry. Am I looking at the correct slide? I am not looking at the correct slide. Yes, okay. What advantages will make you stand out and be admitted to the CS and ES majors of these prestigious schools? Academics, extracurricular activities, competitions, etc. So just based on the question, I am so CS is computer science, obviously, and ES likely, I believe, stands for engineering science. And engineering science is something that only the University of Toronto offers. And so I'm guessing like these prestigious schools means like probably U of T and U Waterloo. Most likely, again, this is just an assumption. Feel free to like clarify later in the open questions period. But yeah, so this is something that we've definitely talked about. Academics, definitely something important. All schools will look at marks. Extracurricular activities, yeah, so if you're applying for something as high, kind of like as high up or like as competitive, I should say, as CS or ES at U of T, yes, extracurricular activities will definitely matter because there will be essay questions. In fact, on the University of Toronto engineering application, there's actually one place where they just say, list your extracurricular activities. And you have to like, and you just like create an activity and then you like and you type in all the details. You're like, oh, it's like the starting date, the ending date, and like where you did this activity, like what did you learn, and you also need a reference. Yeah, so extracurricular activity is definitely important. Competitions, yes, I also talked about this. So yeah, competitions, I believe it's extremely important if you are going for U Waterloo math, but otherwise not so much. Like it's still important, like but it's still important, but only as important as, I guess, an extracurricular activity. So yeah, I guess the general answer is all of the above.
I might start with this one for can grade 10 volunteer activities for semester 2 count towards IB's CAS? Any advice for CAS? First part, straight answer, no, but ask your CAS coordinator. Every IB school will have a CAS coordinator. They can explain all the exact details. But no, you can't do it in grade 10. Any advice for CAS? Well, I would say is one thing is to try to plan it out. Like You don't need to plan before grade 11 because you can't really do anything by that time. But the requirements aren't that hard anymore. Like it used to be worse, but now you just have to have like one big project and then 2 of creativity, 2 of activity, 2 of service. It's not important to get that all done in grade 11 or something. It's not like you need to do it right away, but you need to have a plan for what you're going to be doing during those 2 years, where you're going to find a month or 2 months to commit like a few hours a week to some activity or like some kind of CAS experience. Just make sure to plan it out. And then the other part of advice is that if you're already trying for really competitive programs and you're trying a lot of extracurriculars, try to like approach it with that in mind first, like what you want with your life, and think of CAS after. Like you can fill in the gaps, but a lot of students automatically do all the CAS requirements because of the ambitious things they're trying anyways, right? So keep that in mind. Yeah, work for yourself. CAS is supposed to help you, but it can limit you if you're thinking of it too strictly about CAS. Like just do the bare minimum for areas where you don't care as much. Like if you're not going into something athletic, you don't need more than 2 activities. You will not do any better in IB for an extensive CAS than for a barely passing CAS. So yeah, work for yourself and plan to do the bare minimum.
Yeah, and just on another note, as Neil said, don't try to like do CAS. Like usually the activities you're doing right now will count for CAS and they'll basically complete your CAS. Like CAS can be like really, another thing is CAS can be like really simple. Like if you like run every day, that can count as CAS. And like, I know for me, I literally put like Minecraft building as CAS. So like a lot of things can just be CAS. Like it's probably one of the easier requirements for IB, is what I would say.
Yeah, I think what Alex and Neil said are definitely very true. One thing about CAS is so as our CAS teacher reminded us in an email a while ago, I still remember this. Don't front load CAS. So what front loading means is you try to finish everything at the start of grade 11. That is a bad idea because first of all, it's not the point of CAS, because the point of CAS is like you do activities that are good for you throughout grade 11 and 12. So it's not the point of CAS, and it's also not permitted. And essentially like it's just a bad idea. So CAS is not something you should focus very hard on. Again, like as Alex and Neil said, but it's also like you should pay attention to it, but you shouldn't pay attention to it at the start of grade 11 and then no other time, which is kind of what I did, and I regretted it at the end of CAS. Yes.
Yeah, one last quick detail. Whenever you're unsure of something, ask your CAS coordinator. They will absolutely help you out. They can tell you if something's eligible to meet this requirement and like if this is allowed, etc. Our CAS coordinator helped us a lot, especially if you directly contact them, they can help you a lot. But on to the next question. What about Crinoline Bi School, the great school we attended in Ottawa? If you want to apply to this in English, it's a high school. If you have any advice and experience to share, we will do that. I will address the second part first. Is it good or bad to study in French schools and primary schools and high schools and even universities in the future? Will English writing be affected? That like the French part, it's really up to you. Like I think it's an enriching experience. I think it's good to be bilingual, especially if you live in Canada. I wouldn't recommend going to an all French school if you care about English writing. What we did was French immersion, so we went to English schools, but some courses were in French up until grade 10, grade 11, and grade 12. We only took one French course. If you take this French immersion program, no, this is important, no English writing will not be affected because you're taking the same English classes as like the English program, right? Your writing skills should be at the same level. And sometimes people actually do better with French immersion. This isn't guaranteed, but they sometimes do better just because they have more experience in language and stuff, opens your mind, things like that. I'm sure there's plenty of psychological research on it. In terms of advice to get into Crinoline Bi, I would say I don't have as good of advice. I think I'll let Alex and Danny do most of it because I didn't put too much time into it. It's just that like what the advice I would give is that if you're doing things only to get into Crinoline Bi, like you start a bunch of extracurriculars at the start of grade 8, so you can say like, oh, look at all I did, you should accept me, or you just start grinding grades in grade 7, even though you were more relaxed up to grade 6. You're probably not going to get it. I don't say that with certainty, but you probably won't. They're going to like, just because of the time constraints, if you were already a good student up to that point, there's a good chance you'll get in. If you're really trying to like cram it in at the end, I don't think you can grow enough in that time, especially as a younger child, to get in. That's what I've seen in my experience.
Okay, I can talk a bit about the application. I think I did almost too much because for at least for the exam, like I spent the whole Christmas doing like SAT questions and stuff, which I think is a bit overboard. But obviously, if you want to like try to do well in the exam, obviously prepare for the CAT exam. At least for Ottawa, they need a teacher recommendation. So I would recommend getting a teacher to like really like you, especially if it's like a teacher in a subject you like. So for example, I got my teacher recommendation from my science teacher who really liked me. So that probably helped me get in. And yeah, I think what Neil said, don't just start extracurriculars or whatever for the sake of getting into IB. Right, talk about the extracurriculars you're already doing. So for example, if you have been playing hockey for a while, talk about hockey. You don't even necessarily have to be like good at hockey, just like if you've done it for a while, you can talk about that in the essays. And English writing is quite important. English everything is quite important for the IB application because on the exam there's English reading, writing, spelling even. So English is quite important. And obviously for the essays, English is also really important.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I think definitely what Alex and Neil said were really applicable. Yeah, like as for getting into Chronobi, I think so. I think Neil talked about like the extracurriculars. Alex talked about the test. So I'll talk a bit about like the essays that you have to write. So like as for the essays, they aren't that long, but at the same time, they were of comparable length to the U of T CS application. So you can at least as of the time that I applied. So yeah, yes, it is a rather significant amount of work. Yeah, like for the essays, like the questions are also like pretty similar to the uni applications that I wrote. So I think it's definitely something that you should like take your time doing. And yeah, since the questions are released rather early on in the school year, it's something that like you can develop using the English skills you learned throughout the year also. And definitely like a strong essay will be very helpful in getting into getting into IB, because yes, English is important. And moving on to the next question: how to prepare for the CCC competition, and what resources do you recommend if you like coding? Okay, so CCC. So CCC, I can understand why this question was asked, because CCC is not like most other Waterloo contests in that it's rather difficult to prepare for. It's not at all intuitive how to begin. So competitive programming, right? Essentially, so the best way to improve in competitive programming is similar to the best way to improve in math. And I say this because most people are much more familiar with math than with programming. So I would say practice questions are definitely the most important thing to do if you want to be good at CCC/competitive programming. So in programming, essentially, the two things you need to do to get good are make your code work and make your code work fast. Also, yes, I should say first, competitive programming is where you write code to solve problems. And like you have like a 3-hour time limit, so it's kind of like a math contest in that sense. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, you don't have to write pretty code, it just has to work. And it's a very different type of coding from what you learn in CS in school, or in ICS in school. So yeah, so I am going to share a resource that really helps me out. So just so I'm gonna send a link in chat. I hope it doesn't ban me. Okay, I've sent a link in chat. Basically, so that's a link to a PDF book that's all about like C++ for competitive programmers. Yes, it's in the name. It is C++. For those of you using Python, I'm sorry, you can still use the algorithms in the book, as similar for Java, so on and so forth. But yeah, I would say like, so yeah, like learn the concepts and then apply them in practice questions or in practice contests. So So yeah, and as for like practice questions and contests, so on you write the CCC on the CCC grader. I would recommend doing questions on like past CCC questions on that, because that's definitely something that that should like help you out. And familiarize yourself with like the system that you use to submit questions. Another good resource, another really good resource in my opinion, is Codeforces, which I've sent in chat. So Codeforces is a website where like essentially how it works is like they have contests very often, and like you can log into the contest and like do them. It's kind of like it's honestly kind of like CCC. Like not completely similar, but it's the same idea of like, oh, here's a competitive programming problem. Write the code to solve the problem. And obviously there's some differences, right? Because like obviously like it's not the same people writing the CCC and these Codeforces contests. But I would say like, because they're very frequent contests, and you can also solve like questions from past contests. And furthermore, they have, and furthermore, also another useful thing is if you can solve questions. If you can't solve questions, I should say. There's these things called editorials where like they essentially solve the question for you, and then I found that that's one of the best ways to learn, and those are also on Codeforces. So yes, yeah, resources and practice questions. Do practice questions, and you'll get high marks on CCC. TM.
Yeah, I only have 2 more questions. So in terms of difficulty and content, what is the difference between IB English and ELA? So these Waterloo programs require an IB English score of 5. So what average English score should I get in order to be able to get 5 and above for IB English at grade 11? So 2 important parts of this. Actually, first I'll address ELA. Sorry, we're not actually familiar with what ELA is. You're free to clarify in chat if you ask this question, and then we'll try to address it. But we'll just consider like other English programs. The first part I'll address is like just the requirements. So there's a required IB English score of 5. If you're getting a grade on in some other curriculum, like if you're an Ontario student, you're getting an Ontario mark. This requirement just does not apply, by the way. But you'll still need like an 80 or something in English. So, Stephen is mentioning that he thinks ELA is English language art. Yeah, sorry, I'm still not familiar with that, but to like, yeah, sorry, actually I'll get to the difference between IB English and other part in a moment. Basically, yeah, so like one thing is if you have a different grade, that isn't actually a requirement, but if you only have an IB score, then you're going to an IB school where they're only using that scale. They will tell you on each assignment which score you're getting from 1 to 7, like how this performance will translate into your final mark. Like some assignments might be 4, some might be 7. And then you'll get an idea of if you're on track to be on 5, like if your average score is 5 or higher, basically. For the other part, what's the difference for IB English? I would say for most high school curricula, it's about a year's worth harder, but not by the amount of content you're doing. Like I would say compared to other IB courses, it's the least time spent relative to like other programs. Like you're not doing like double the time because you're doing so much more content. It's just a lot more critical thinking. You have to do a lot more like poetry analysis and things like that at a fairly high level. And honestly, it can be a hit or miss. It can be quite difficult. It's a bit of a risk to take. If you study more, your progress won't be as fast as in say like math or science or something. You're not just learning objective content. You just have to like think for yourself. It can be pretty difficult, honestly.
All right. So does the gifted program help for getting admitted to IB? I didn't do well in the English test required to get into the gifted program. How can I improve on my English? Okay, so generally the gifted program doesn't actually provide an edge over students in other programs because the content in gifted is actually pretty similar to the Ontario one. And with the gifted program changing this year, it's gotten a bit worse, I want to say, but it's not very useful for getting into IB. Like I know most people who get into IB weren't in the gifted program, obviously. So don't worry if you didn't get into, if you aren't in gifted and applying to IB, it doesn't really make a difference. The only real difference I can see it making is that you're around more people who are better critical thinkers, or maybe like in that sense, like you're surrounded by more competitive students. So maybe I guess that's a benefit, but that's not necessarily even true either. And okay, how can I improve on my English? There's a lot of ways to improve on English. I would recommend just working on English outside of the normal school content. So like make it a habit of reading good books, classic books, or just any type of book with like good literature. Doing creative writing, I guess, or doing practice if you really need it. So for like Khan Academy, for example. So in school for English, make sure to follow the criteria for each project or essay or anything. That's pretty important for getting the marks you want. Study in advance for tests. I don't really see English tests, but I don't know. It could be different for you guys. And work with others and get help when you need help. It's pretty important to ask for help if you really need it, especially as you go into high school and university. So yeah, those are my tips for improving on English, I guess. And also, we're done. That's the end of
Yes.
our presentation. If you guys have any questions, just ask them in chat or something, or unmute, I don't know. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If there's, it's open to questions. If there's no questions, I guess we can end it there.
Yes, I think our presentation ran a little bit longer than I was supposed to, but that's
7
okay.
minutes over.
Okay, let's give them a round of applause for their outstanding presentation.
Yes.
Yeah,
everyone's
virtual applause.
Oh, I see the applause emojis. Smile.
Okay. And if
Yes, this is going to be posted on YouTube. I think, Stephen, you said it was going to be on your YouTube channel.
yeah, and now I'll put the link to the video in the WeChat group.
All right.
Okay. And I think we'll end this lecture here right now. If anybody else have other questions, you can ask them in the WeChat group. And thank you everyone for coming today. Hope you have a great weekend.
Yeah, thanks for having us.